Murder at the Midnight Matinee, Toronto, 1948. A midnight screening at the once glorious Royal Grenadier Theatre was meant to be a celebration of art, defiance, and avant-garde cinema. But when famed surrealist director Valentin Duprés is found strangled in the projection booth, his body tangled in celluloid, the screening becomes a scene of cold-blooded murder. Welcome back to Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's True Crime Podcast. I'm Jay Nickel of Nickel Investigations, and you're listening to another Whodunit Wednesday in a Mick and Mack mystery, where we step into the world of classic detective fiction. Go back to the golden era of detective fiction and enjoy stories in the tradition of the greats of writing. From Agatha Christie to Raymond Chandler to John Creasy, these are short stories I hope you enjoy. Hello, I'm Jay Nickel of Nickel Investigations, and this is Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's True Crime Podcast. Ontario Cold Cases is a gripping true crime podcast that shines a light on unsolved murders, disappearances, and forgotten crimes from across the province and the world. With meticulous research, compelling storytelling, and a commitment to historical accuracy, we bring you the real stories of victims, investigators, and suspects. Stories that demand to be heard. Each week we take you deep into the world of true crime with a packed schedule of episodes. Tuesdays, historical true crime cases, exploring infamous and obscure crimes from history. Wednesdays, the Mick and Mack mysteries, a thrilling fictional detective series set in 1950s Toronto. Thursdays, World Cold Case Thursday, investigating unsolved cases from around the globe. Sundays, Ontario Cold Cases, the latest episode uncovering an unsolved mystery from Ontario. From high-profile crimes that shock the nation to little-known cases waiting for justice, we uncover the truth, one case at a time. Join us as we explore the dark corners of history and mystery, where every clue could lead to answers and every case deserves a second look. Subscribe now wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts and never miss an episode of Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's True Crime Podcast. Chapter 1. Curtains Up. The marquee outside the Royal Grenadier Theatre flickered in the cold Toronto air, its once gilded edges dulled by time and soot. But tonight, the old cinema pulsed with life. A sold-out crowd had turned out for the midnight screening of Dream in a Broken Mirror, the final work of famed and famously impossible Valentin Duprés. The street hummed with murmurs, clove smoke, and wool-clad cinephiles quoting André Breton like scripture. Inside, the filming spooled in slow, hypnotic waves. A woman in a cracked mirror reaching toward a staircase that led to a void. A man whose shadow turned into a wolf and devoured a rotary phone. An umbrella, bleeding ink. Mack shifted uncomfortably in his aisle seat, arms folded across his chest. "If this is art," he muttered, "I'm a Monet and in a meat grinder." Beside him, Mick leaned forward, fedora tipped back, eyes narrowed in focus. "It's symbolic," he whispered. "Yeah? Of what exactly? Existential plumbing problems?" Before Mick could reply, the house lights shuddered. A brief flicker. A real change, maybe. The screen shivered, then steadied. A collective breath rippled through the crowd but quickly dissolved back into rapt attention, or baffled paralysis. In the lobby, the scent of scorched popcorn hung low. A thin stream of smoke wafted from the concession stand, ignored by the teenage attendant, who was too busy sketching surrealist eyeballs into her math homework. Somewhere upstairs, a door slammed. Then a scream. Sharp, sudden, and far too real. The theater's manager, Hank Greaves, burst into the screening room like a man on fire. "Cut the reel, get the lights," he bellowed, his bow tie askew. The film choked mid-frame, an eyeball melting into a staircase, and the screen went dark. Whispers erupted into a buzz. The second scream followed from above, this one more guttural. People turned toward the back exit, unsure if it was part of the show. It wasn't. Mick and Mack reached the projection booth within minutes. The door was locked from the inside. Ruby Lang, the projectionist, pale and breathless, pointed at the tiny smeared window. "He's in there," she whispered. I think he's... She didn't finish the sentence. Hank rattled the handle. "There's no key. It locks from the inside, always has." Mick stepped forward and peered through the dusty glass. Inside, slumped over a film reel and tangled in a loop of black celluloid, was Valentin Duprés. His eyes stared wide, unblinking, into the projector's final beam of light. Mick frowned. "Looks like he took his last bow." Mack grimaced. "He's tangled up in his own film. That's got to be the most ironic death I've ever seen." Mick tilted his head, squinting as if the angles of the scene might reveal something hidden. "That's no accident, that's staging." From behind them, Ruby gasped. "That's symbolic." Mack sighed. "Oh no, don't you start." Chapter 2. The Final Cut. The Royal Grenadier Theatre had never been quieter. The surrealists had shuffled home, the protesters dispersed, and the cops cordoned off the lobby with crime scene tape, clashed spectacular with the lobby's faded Art Deco decor. Mick stood over a crepe labeled "Dream in a Broken Mirror, version X." Its seal torn, the reel inside partially spooled and oddly damp. He crouched, running a gloved finger over the jagged tear in the film canister. "Version X," he murmured. Mack looked up from inspecting a pair of scissors that had been recovered from under seat H14. "Sounds ominous. Like one of those secret soda formulas they don't want the public to taste. Or a cut of the film someone didn't want showing." Mack held up the scissors. These were wedged behind the seat cushion. "If they're trying to sneak them in, they didn't do a great job hiding them. Still got popcorn butter on the handle." Mick stood, pocketed a page of scribbled notes from Duprés' screening script, half in French, half in looping nonsense, and nodded toward the lobby. "Let's talk to the suspects. Start with Ruby." Ruby Lang, arms folded and scowling at a disappointed director, was back in the projection booth, clutching a film sprocket like a rosary. "Unusual? During that film?" she repeated, when Mick asked if she noted anything strange. "Honey, the lead actress turned into a flock of pigeons on screen. Doesn't get more unusual than that." "I nearly ducked," Mack muttered. "Thought the pigeons flew into the theater." Exactly as Valentin intended. Pure cinema magic. He wanted the audience to question reality. "Well, consider my reality thoroughly questioned," Mack said. "Especially during that 5-minute close-up of a melting clock. I thought the projector was melting." Ruby smiled wistfully. "An homage to Dali. The melting clock symbolizes time losing all meaning." "Time definitely lost meaning for me," Mack said. "Checked my watch twice during that scene." Mick held up the torn script page. "Did you see anyone near the projection booth before the screening?" Ruby's eyes flicked to the torn canister. "I did hear someone on the landing about 20 minutes before showtime. Thought it was Hank coming to gripe about the projector again. Could have been anyone. You know, Gerald Stone spent half the film scowling like he'd swallowed a lemon, and Boland was scribbling like a mad scientist." "Did Duprés ever mention anything about a version X?" Mick asked. Ruby's voice dropped to a reverent hush. "He said there was an original cut. Too pure, too raw. Too dangerous for conventional minds," he said. She looked wistfully at the projector. "But I never saw it. Maybe that was it." Mack blinked. "So you're saying we just screened a dangerous version?" "Art is always dangerous, darling." Mack turned to Mick. "I liked it better when dangerous meant falling off ladders." Gerald Stone was in the manager's office, still in his three-piece suit, still clutching his moral outrage like a briefcase. To document the indecency firsthand, he explained, when asked why he attended. I needed evidence of the filth being peddled as art in this cinema. Funny, Mack said. Must have missed the filth. Unless you mean that scene where the actor mud wrestled with his subconscious. There was a lot of mud flying. Precisely, Gerald exclaimed. A metaphor made manifest, wallowing in the muck of moral decay. That so-called dream sequence is a direct assault on our community's values. Mick leaned in. Did you interact with Duprés before the screening? I tried. The man brushed me off. Said he wouldn't debate a bureaucrat in a bad tie. Gerald sniffed, adjusting said tie. I simply wanted to warn him that we were drafting a motion to pull funding from theaters showing degeneracy. Did you see anyone suspicious before the show? Mick asked. Dr. Boland was muttering to himself. Ruby was swooning over that infernal projector, and that film student, Elsa, was fluttering around like a bat in a bell tower. Did Duprés mention a version X? Mick asked. I wouldn't know. I stopped listening after he used the phrase cinematic truth serum. Ridiculous. He stood, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeve. If you want my opinion, Mack groaned, we don't. They found Elsa DeWitt, curled up in the front row, beret askew, mascara streaked. A half-empty bottle of imported cola sat in the armrest beside her. I'm not okay, she sniffed. Valentin was more than a mentor. He was a visionary, a prophet with a Bolex camera. Mick crouched beside her. Sorry for your loss. Did you help him prepare for the screening? She nodded. I brought him espresso, arranged the post-film Q&A, and lit incense in the balcony to create ambiance. She looked up. Did they find his final cut? You mean version X? Mick asked. Her eyes widened. You've seen it? Only what was left of the reel, Mick said. It was damaged. Did you know what was on it? He said it revealed everything. A confession, a confrontation. Art is the mirror, he told me. But sometimes it shows things people aren't ready to see. She paused. I never saw it, but I think someone did. And they wanted it buried. Mack scratched his head. Look, kid, I don't mean to sound insensitive, but this is starting to feel less like a murder, more like an art school project gone nuclear. Elsa blinked. Is that your way of saying you're lost? Completely, Mack said. Hank Greaves stood behind the popcorn counter, arms crossed, face grim. The machine was unplugged. You boys find out who did this, and maybe I can get back to worrying about burst pipes and broken projectors instead of killers, he said. Mick gestured toward the reel canister. Ever seen version X before tonight? Never. Valentin kept it locked up tighter than my liquor cabinet and jazz night. If he screened it tonight, it was a surprise to all of us. Who had access to the projection booth? Mick asked. Ruby, and technically me, but I haven't touched that contraption in years. Gives me hives. Mack leaned on the counter. What about these scissors we found in the crowd? Hank raised an eyebrow. They're mine? Probably fell off my utility belt. Use them to trim tape when Ruby splices reels. So they could have ended up in the wrong hands, Mick asked. They could have ended up in the popcorn, Hank said dryly. It's that kind of night. Dr. Francis Boland was scribbling notes on the back of a poster for Meshes of the Afternoon. I was testing my hypothesis that Duprés's disjointed imagery could trigger mass hysteria, he said, eyes bright. Mack sighed. You're saying the movie could make people crazy? Like drive us insane on the spot? In layman's terms, yes. I recorded several audience members in trance states. Slack jaws, trembling knees, it was riveting. Sounds like my uncle at the horse races, Mack muttered. Mick flipped open his notebook. Did you speak to Duprés? He refused to engage. Arrogant man. Believed himself untouchable. But if version X contained what I think it did, Boland's eyes gleamed. It could have fractured his own mind. Or someone else's, Mick said. Is it worth killing for? Boland tilted his head. Art that reveals too much can be lethal, and sometimes necessary. Mack stepped back. You're not helping your case, Doc. Dr. Boland merely smiled and jotted something in his notebook. Investigator Mack. Mild delusions, paranoia, sardinicism. Back in the lobby, Mick rubbed his eyes. We've got motive, madness, and a mystery reel. And scissors, Mack added. Don't forget the buttered scissors. Mick glanced back at the flickering marquee and sewed. The curtain's up, Mack. Now let's find the final act. Chapter 3. Reals and Real Lies. Morning crept up in the Royal Grenadier like a stagehand pulling back a curtain too slowly. The theatre's neon marquee still buzzed in defiance of the daylight, flickering between midnight matinee and now playing Dream in a Broken Mirror, as if unsure which reality it belonged to. Inside, Mick hunched over a folding table in the lobby, now doubling as an impromptu evidence station. Duprés' annotated script pages were spread out in front of him, accompanied by half a reel of version X, a magnifying glass, and a steaming thermos of coffee so strong it could have stripped the chrome off a bumper. The eye sees all. The mirror lies, Mick read aloud, frowning. He flipped through Duprés' chicken scratch notes. Among the production instructions and surreal doodles were cryptic notations. Scene 7. Revealed trauma through fracture. Cut out municipal speech. Risk too high. Keep Elsa from full context until premiere. Mick frowned. Trauma? Municipal speech? Tapped the note scribbled beside his sketched eye. What were you trying to say, Valentin? Just then, Marv, a wiry man in a moth-eaten scarf and enormous glasses, shuffled over from the theatre's cafe nook, clutching a cup of herbal tea and a copy of Cinephile Quarterly. You the detective, Marv asked? Mick nodded. McCathie. Marv beamed. You know, I saw version X. I knew it was different. I've seen Duprés' earlier cuts. This one had teeth. Darker. Personal. What do you mean personal? There was this one scene, never saw it before, where a figure in a mayor's sash stands in front of a crumbling city and starts vomiting celluloid tape. Marv sipped his tea unfazed. Then the screen cracks like a glass, and you see the figure's face change into Valentin's. Mick blinked. That wasn't in the final cut. Nope. Another bit where a projectionist burns reels in the baptismal font. It felt confessional. Mick's pen hovered above his notebook. Do you think Duprés was exposing something, maybe about himself or someone else? Marv shrugged. Hard to say. Could have been trauma. Could have been metaphor. With surrealism, you never know if someone's bearing their soul or just flexing their weird. Mick nodded slowly. What about the audience? Did anyone seem particularly affected? Well, Gerald Stone looked like he swallowed his own tie. Boland was trembling with excitement. And that film student, Elsa, she was crying even before the pigeons turned into typewriters. Mick raised an eyebrow. Typewriters? Marv waved a hand. It's best not to ask. Meanwhile, 2 floors up, in the Dreams on Film seminar room, converted from a dusty storage closet, Mack slouched in the back of a makeshift lecture delivered by Professor Leonard Trask, a bearded academic who had clearly slept in his corduroy. Buñuel, Trask declared, teaches us that narrative is a prison, a chain of casualty shackling the subconscious. By abandoning logic, we liberate the id. Mack squinted. I thought Benwell was a pasta dish. Several heads turned. Trask blinked. Benwell was a filmmaker. Oh, Mack paused. So, not pasta? Professor Trask pressed on. In Duprés' work, especially version X, we see a rejection of linearity, a descent into symbolic recursion. Take the staircase scene. What did it mean to you? Mack rubbed his temples. I thought the guy was late for something. Exactly, Trask said triumphantly. Late for his own awakening. Mack leaned over to the grad student beside him. Is it normal to feel like your brain's being put through a salad spinner? She smiled sympathetically. You're doing great. Mack blinked. Really? No, she said gently, but your tie matches your socks, so that's something. By the time Trask moved into an impromptu interpretive dance meant to embody filmic rebirth through subconscious inversion, Mack had seen enough. He slipped out the side door and wandered back to the lobby, shaking his head like a man recovering from a fever dream. Mick looked up from his notes. You okay? I'm not sure, Mack said. I think I just saw a man become a metaphor and then trip over a projector cord. Find out anything? Mack shrugged. The staircase meant awakening, or lateness, or indigestion, hard to say. Mick turned back to the reel. Version X was more than symbolic. Duprés was exposing something, someone. The trauma wasn't abstract, it was real. He used symbols as camouflage. Mack pointed at the torn canister. And someone didn't like what they saw. They both stared at the reel in silence for a moment. Mack cleared his throat. Hey, Mick, yeah? If I ever try to make a movie where pigeons turn into typewriters, just hit me with the reel. Chapter 4. The Censorship Mob. By noon, the Royal Grenadier Theatre looked less like a murder scene and more like the site of an impending holy war. The picket signs were back. Keep filth off our screens. Down with depravity. Art shouldn't make you throw up. At the front of the line, red-faced and righteously loud, stood Councillor Gerald Stone, flanked by a handful of cardigan-clad retirees and one man holding a crucifix in one hand and a hand-drawn copy of a poster of Casablanca in the other. This is not censorship, Stone bellowed into a reporter's microphone. This is civilization. Inside the theater, Mack watched from the lobby window with a coffee in one hand, a half-eaten donut in the other. You know, he said, I don't remember the 10 Commandments saying anything about surrealism. Maybe it's hidden in the footnotes. Mick sat nearby, flipping through a thick envelope just delivered from the National Film Board of Canada. It's not just public outrage. Duprés had a contract with the NFB. They funded Dream in a Broken Mirror under the condition he screen that approved version only, strict clause. No version X, no deviations. Mack whistled. So last night's screening? Broke the deal big time. Mick tossed a release form onto the table. If word gets out he breached the agreement, not only does the theater get dragged into a funding scandal, but Duprés' final legacy goes up in smoke. Which makes this more than murder, Mack said. It's a ticking PR bomb. Mick nodded. Someone had a reason to stop version X from being seen. Maybe they didn't mean to kill him. Maybe it was about stopping the film. Or maybe, Mack said, licking powdered sugar from his fingers, they're just a bad critic with really strong opinions. In the projection booth, Ruby Lang was coiling reels with trembling hands. Her eyes, usually lit with celluloid devotion, were heavy. I didn't know about any NFB deal, she said, voice quiet. Valentin told me this was his true version, the one the world needed to see. Did you see him bring in the canister, Mick asked? Ruby nodded. He came in just before the doors opened, carried it in a satchel, all secretive, said, Tonight the veil lifts. I figured it was just his usual flair. Was a projection booth locked? Mick asked. Ruby hesitated. Yes. But there's a spare key for emergencies. It's supposed to stay in Hank's office. Mick and Mack exchanged glances. Hank Greaves didn't even pretend to be surprised. Spare key? Yeah, I've got one in my drawer, he said, leading them into the cluttered little office behind the concession stand. Been there since the 20s. I've used it maybe twice. One time we had a kid get stuck in there trying to nap on a reel bin. He opened the drawer, then stopped. Well, he said, I've used it a third time if it were still here. The key was gone. Mick straightened. Who else has access to this office? Hank frowned. Me? Ruby sometimes. Elsa helped me prep it for the Q&A setup. Oh, and Gerald stormed in here during the first reel to demand we stop the screening. Did he see the drawer? He saw everything, believe me. He's pacing like a lawyer in closing arguments. Knocked over a can of peanuts. Mack raised an eyebrow. Keep peanuts in your desk? I keep whiskey in the peanuts, Hank said. Don't judge me. Mick stepped back. That key was used to get into the booth. The murder wasn't a heat-of-the-moment attack. Someone planned this. They knew how to get in and what to take out. Mack looked toward the window again, where Gerald Stone was now dramatically dabbing his forehead with a handkerchief between interviews. Think it was him? Mack asked. Maybe he thought killing the movie meant killing the message. Or maybe, Mick said, someone else knew what the message actually was. Just then, a new figure entered the lobby. A young woman in a tailored gray skirt and smart jacket, eyes sharp and hair pinned in a style that said, I don't waste time. She held out a badge. Claire Hastings, National Film Board Compliance Division. I need to speak with whoever screened the unauthorized version of Dream in a Broken Mirror. Mack sighed. Oh, good, just what we needed. Mick stood to greet her, already flipping open his notebook. Miss Hastings, he said, I think we're going to need to talk about what exactly Duprés was hiding in that film, and who had a reason to bury it. Chapter 5. The Smoke and the Screen. The Royal Grenadier had gone quiet again. Too quiet. The picketers had finally thinned. Gerald Stone had been escorted off the sidewalk by a weary constable after attempting to give a sermon to a paper boy. Inside, the theater smelled faintly of cold tobacco, silver nitrate, and spliced tape. Mick and Mack had barely finished debriefing the stern, pencil-skirted Miss Hastings from the National Film Board when a scream pierced the air, sharp as a film tear. Booth, Hank shouted, charging up the stairs 2 at a time. Mick and Mack followed. Smoke billowed from the projection room. Mack yanked the door open, this time unlocked, and dropped low under the haze. Ruby, Mick called, covering his mouth. They found her slumped on the floor, coughing violently, eyes streaming from the acrid haze. A scorched towel smoldered near the film vents. Someone had stuffed it into the intake fan, turned on the reel, and locked the door from the outside. Smoke bomb, Mack muttered, helping her up. Crude, but nasty. Celluloid burns fast, Ruby wheezed. If I hadn't stepped out for a moment, I'd be a real ghost. Mick looked at the rigged vent. Someone wanted to use silence. Ruby steadied herself against the reel canister. For what? I don't know anything. Maybe not, Mick said, turning toward the burnt fan. You've seen everything. Back downstairs, Mick inspected what was left of the version X reel again. Now singed at the edges, but something caught his eye. A splice not made with tape, but with glue, crudely done the way amateurs sometimes patch footage. He ran the strip under the lamp and watched as the frames ticked past. A woman in a mirror. A child's toy dropped into water. A pair of eyes, wide with fear. Then something strange. Not actors. not surreal imagery. Grainy, real footage. Duprés, not in costume, talking into the camera in a dim room, agitated, whispering, frame jittering. Mick slowed it, rewound it, and read his lips. They lied. It was never theirs. They took it. They buried it. I have the proof now. He exhaled. It wasn't just surrealism. It was confessional. He smuggled personal footage into the film. Mack blinked. What, like a diary on a film? Mick nodded. Or blackmail. Maybe both. Back in Hank's office, the manager poured Ruby a glass of flat cola from behind the counter. Someone torched the booth, trying to shut her up, he said. That's not about censorship anymore, that's fear. Or desperation, Mick said. Duprés didn't just challenge morals, he threatened reputations. If someone knew that footage existed. Mack frowned. But who would know? He didn't tell anyone about version X, not even Ruby. Someone saw it, Mick said. Maybe not the whole read, maybe just enough. He held up the charred canister. I think Valentin Duprés didn't just make enemies in art circles. I think he captured something he wasn't supposed to. Mack looked at the reel, then at Mick. What do we do now? Mick grabbed his coat and hat. We find out what Duprés saw. Then we find out who would kill to keep it hidden. Chapter 6. A Frame Too Far. It was well past midnight. Again. The Royal Grenadier sat cloaked in shadow, the lobby lit only by the dim wall sconces flickering like candle flames at a seance. In the empty theatre, Mick and Mack sat side by side, surrounded by rows of silent velvet seats and the faint creak of the old balcony rafters above them. On screen, the flickering reel of version X whirred into life. Spliced, jittery, and utterly baffling. It began with the same imagery as before. A staircase had spiraled into sand. A pair of gloved hands shattering a mirror. A table set for 12 with no diners. Then came the splice. The tone shifted, grainy, raw. A flower bloomed in reverse, petals retreating into bud, before morphing into a spider with a silver trumpet protruding from its thorax. Mack leaned over and whispered, Okay, I gotta ask, why is a flower turning into a trumpet spider? Is that a political thing or just bad gardening? Mick didn't answer. He was leaning forward, brow furrowed, eyes scanning every frame like a code breaker mid-crack. The images came faster now. A figure in a mayoral sash, faceless, repeatedly crossing out blueprints. A close-up of a typewriter's spacebar being struck again and again. A cinema ticket being torn in half, revealing a second hidden ticket underneath. And finally, a match being lit. And the face of Gerald Stone briefly superimposed on the flame before dissolving into smoke. Then, darkness. The reel snapped to its end. The whir of the projector slowed the theater fell into silence. Mack sat still for a moment, chewing the inside of his cheek. Then he stood and walked toward the screen. Duprés layered it, he said. He didn't just record evidence, he encoded it. Darren-style imagery, yes, but arranged like sentences, like accusations. Mack scratched his head. All I saw was a flower, a spider, a trumpet, some angry typing, and Stone's face in a flame. I mean, if that's not dream logic, I don't know what is. Mick turned to face him. It's not dream logic, it's sequence. First, the flower, innocence. Then the spider, betrayal. The trumpet, exposure, sound, public reckoning. And the typewriter? Silence communication. Someone tried to stop a message from getting out. Mack blinked. So the tickets? One torn in half, revealing a second ticket hidden underneath. That's the key. There was a second narrative, a secret event under the official one, something buried beneath the surface. Mick stepped back into the aisle. And the flame, the face in it? Mack nodded. Gerald Stone. Stone was involved in something Duprés uncovered. Maybe a scandal, maybe something tied to city contracts or censorship bribes. Valentin encoded his accusations into the film. Couldn't prove it with documents, but he could put it on screen. Mack leaned back in his seat, folding his arms. So Stone sees the film, sees his own dirty laundry hung out in art school code, and panics. Mick nodded, and someone, maybe Stone, maybe someone else trying to protect him, gets into the booth with the spare key, kills Duprés, and tries to stop the film. Mack whistled low. All because of a film nobody was supposed to understand. Mick smiled faintly. That was the brilliance of it. The message was hidden where only the right eyes could see. Mack stood, shaking his head. I still say the spider didn't need the trumpet. Violin, maybe? Something classy? Mick chuckled. Come on, let's pay Stone a visit. Chapter 7. The Killer Revealed. The sun was still hiding below the horizon when Mick and Mack returned to the Royal Grenadier for one final act. They weren't looking for Gerald Stone anymore. They were looking for Dr. Francis Boland. The psychologist was exactly where they expected, in the upstairs lounge, pacing between the lobby's velvet armchairs and the flickering projection window, notebook in hand, murmuring to himself. Good morning, Doctor, Mick said, stepping in the room like a man walking onto a stage he knew by heart. Boland looked up, startled. His eyes darted toward the exit, then relaxed too quickly. Detectives, he said, smoothing his coat. I take it you've reached some sort of conclusion? Mack nodded. Sure did. About the spider trumpet. Boland blinked. Mick stepped forward. We screened the final cut, version X. Valentin's confession encoded in metaphor, clever, symbolic, not subtle. Not if you knew what to look for. Boland's eyes narrowed. He was an artist. He dealt in illusion. He was also a man who knew too much, Mick said. The footage he smuggled in wasn't just about Stone's censorship campaign. It was about you. Boland froze. Mick continued. The hidden footage, the shaking camera, the eyes, the fear, wasn't from a film. It was from a therapy session, one you recorded without consent. Valentin found it. Rubbish. He found the reels you kept, experimental recordings, patients in distress. Some claim they've been manipulated. You called it research. He called it abuse. Boland's composure cracked. He told you he'd include in the film, Mick said softly. That he'd encode it, buried in the surrealism, where no one would believe it, unless they understood. And you panicked. I didn't panic, Boland snapped. I calculated. He stepped back. I tried to stop him, talk sense into him, but he was consumed, obsessed with exposure. You killed him, Mick said. Boland's eyes flared, then dulled. I had to. If that film played for the wrong people like Miss Hastings, I'd be finished. Mack pulled out the scissors, the same ones found under the seat. You used these to cut the reel. Tried to destroy version X. But you missed your cue. Boland looked at the detectives, breathing heavily. Then he smiled. You really think anyone will believe surrealist images over a respected doctor? Mick shrugged. I think when the National Film Board screens that footage, frame by frame, they won't need symbolism, just subtitles. Two officers stepped in from the hallway. Boland didn't resist. He straightened his coat, lifted his chin, and walked out like a man entering his own courtroom drama. Epilogue. Fade to black. The air outside was crisp with the promise of dawn. Mick and Mack stood under the marquee, now dark. The Royal Grenadier would reopen soon. Another matinee, another crowd. But for now, the sidewalk was theirs. Mick adjusted his hat and looked east. Art imitates life, he said, or maybe the other way round. Mack stuffed his hands in his coat pockets. I just want my money back. They walked into the morning light, a pair of detectives. Shadows stretched long, and the reel finally run to the end. The end. Thank you for listening. This has been Jay Nickel of Nickel Investigations and an Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's True Crime Podcast.